My name is Bruce Kogut. I'm the director of the Sanford C. Bernstein Center for Leadership and Ethics. We have the honor of hosting the Botwinick Prize in Ethics every year. The prize dates back to a gift which was endowed from the late Benjamin Botwinick, a graduate of Columbia in 1926, and his wife Bessie. There's other Columbia graduates here in the family who will be meeting soon. The prize is made for someone who has made an outstanding achievement to the areas of ethics and ethical conduct in business. We are very lucky today to have a number of the Botwinick family members here to join us in giving out this award to David Stern, the Commissioner Emeritus of the NBA. I'm going to let Ed give the formal introduction. I will say that it means a lot to us for many reasons, particularly because sports can be a very challenging area for ethics, but also for the initiatives, including the Women's NBA, which is exciting for lots of us. Ed Botwinick, who is a graduate of Columbia a few years ago, will come forward and introduce David Stern, and I think also be responsible for a video. Thank you, Ed.
He's being polite when he says a few years ago. It was well before the middle of the last century. Our honoree today is David Stern, and he needs no introduction to most of you because you've been seeing him on TV and hearing him for probably most of your lives. Today, we honor not only his notable achievements as NBA Commissioner, but the honorable and ethical fashion in which he has carried them out. David is also one of us, a fellow Columbian, a graduate of the law school. He is also a trustee emeritus and is chairman emeritus of the Board of Trustees. I had the privilege of serving as a co-trustee with David, as well as observing his management style during the years that he was chair. I told him at the retirement dinner from his term as trustee that, in my opinion, he had been responsible for fundamental and positive changes in the functioning of that board. He basically morphed it from a sleepy organization into a proactive group that, for the first time in my experience, and I had been there a long time, was making positive contributions to both the operations and the governance of the university. Now back to what he used to call his day job. Under David's leadership for the last 36 years, is that correct? 30 plus 6. The NBA has grown from a small, rather parochial organization to become one of the most successful, diversified entertainment entities in the world. The NBA turnaround and growth during this period compares very favorably with that of major publicly owned growth companies such as Apple Computer and Google. And I have no doubt that were the NBA a public company today, it would be selling at a very high multiple and would probably be a concept stock. In the demanding role of NBA Commissioner, David successfully balanced the competing demands of four major constituencies. There were, of course, the owners and the players. There was also the public and the press. He dealt with many highly visible major problems and occurrences, always calmly, well-reasoned, and ethically. I think that there are very few well-known public figures that can match that performance and record. Under his leadership, the NBA has also made major societal contributions, most notably in the area of race relations. Before we hear from David, we're going to see a short video that highlights some of these contributions, and which I know he considers as one of the hallmarks of his career. Play the video. Do I have to do something here?
He has 3 Columbia degrees.
In the days before LeBron and Kobe, before Michael, before Magic and Larry, they used to say something about the National Basketball Association. They used to say it would never be as popular as other sports, that it would never truly captivate the country, forget about the world. They said the reason was simple. They said the NBA was too black. So then, how did the league get from there to here? To an age when it's not shunned, but celebrated for its makeup, when it's acclaimed for its diversity, when it's a symbol of how important a game can be across borders of all kinds. To the NBA and Commissioner David Stern, basketball has always been seen as an opportunity, a place where society could judge whether somebody has the skills to get the job done, irrespective of the color of their skin.
Way rock the baby to sleep and slam dunk.
Of course, the NBA has a proud heritage of activism dating back to the civil rights movement, headlined by a fearless original who set a new standard for both heroes and champions.
A few young people here that would like to be president of the United States. You can do anything that you want to do, if you want to do it bad enough.
But 2 decades after that, the league was dealing with a myriad of issues and still stuck with the NBA Finals tape delayed on television. Then, though, came the crest of a new golden age for the sport, driven by the rivalry of two icons whose appearances tempted people to focus on their clear differences, but whose talents, competitiveness, and charisma compelled us all to focus on the more important truth that a love of the game made us all so similar.
I love this game.
I love this game.
I love this game.
The wave of superstars that followed continued to transcend misconceptions about race. And the NBA's commitment to support a variety of critical causes began with a passion that has continued and grown. Fittingly, Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday has always fallen in the middle of the NBA season. Over the last 3 decades, it's become a veritable basketball holiday and a call to action to communities across the country to honor the date with service. But few causes and few moments were as visible as the NBA's unwavering support of one of its biggest stars in 1991.
Because of the HIV virus that I have attained, I will have to retire from the Lakers.
And that was only the start of how the league helped Magic change the perception and the conversation about HIV and AIDS.
Three-pointer, yes! Oh, my!
Meanwhile, thanks to an entire dream team of players, the push towards globalization was on. And after representatives of the NBA attended Nelson Mandela's presidential inauguration in 1994, they returned with a few friends in tow every year since to give back to new generations.
People ask us why we're here, and quite simply, we think that basketball is an incredible teaching tool for teamwork on the court and about life off the court.
I love this game.
Why, just weeks ago, the league was back in Johannesburg as part of its annual Basketball Without Borders program.
Hi.
Today, efforts like those compose the many elements of NBA Cares, a model of the impact that a sport or business can make, both in local communities and across the world. On the court, too, the drive to impart change and increase opportunity took a landmark leap forward in 1996 with the creation of the WNBA. 17 years later, generations of role models for young women are at the center of the league's success story. Meanwhile, on the coaching sidelines, in front offices, and owners' boxes, no league has as strong a record of hiring those who have been traditionally excluded as the NBA, with a commitment that has been unwavering from every vantage point. It's tempting, when looking back on the NBA's history and growth, to focus on things like revenues, television ratings, and sneaker sales. But it's more important, more fitting, more authentic to spotlight another truth, that all the things they used to say about the NBA 3 decades ago are all but forgotten. Because the world has changed, and because the NBA has played an essential role in changing it.
Now I'm going to say something that I have been dying to say since David was selected as the honoree for this year. With its first choice for the 2014 Botwinick Prize, the Columbia Business School has selected David Stern.
Honestly, the old joke, my father would have enjoyed it and my mother would have believed it. There it was. I'm, greatly honored and humbled to be accepting this award. That was, hello, fellow trustee. And I am especially honored that Ed Botwinick and Elaine Botwinick-Wolfenson are here, together with Ed's wife, Vicki, to be here for an award that was established and really named in honor of their father and Benjamin Botwinick and Bessie Botwinick. It's really, and to have served as a trustee with Ed is just sort of the icing on the cake. I was, when I got the call, I was thinking about, I see the words written here. It says, "Don't lie, cheat, or steal." And I said, okay, at least not while the camera's on, or you won't get the Botwinick Award. So you have to be a judge. And then I was really worried. I said, okay, what is this ethics stuff? And it was a concern to me. And so I actually went and did a little research to see what I could talk about, and I was relieved to see that when it got past corporate scandals, it talks about principles of value-based leadership with employees and communities, building reputation with authenticity, operating in developing countries, sustainable business practices to improve the environment, the role for business in tackling climate change, and establishing codes of conduct to deal with bribery and corruption. I began to feel more comfortable because all I can talk to you about is the way my professional life unfolded and how we have come to deal with all of those things, all of those issues. And what my conclusion is going to be is that anything that you ultimately do, you're going to have to make choices. You're going to have to make key decisions at intersections. And the list of issues that you're going to be confronted with that have global relevance are going to increasingly get larger and more complex, because we live in an extremely complex time. You cannot possibly, unless you've got your head someplace where it shouldn't be, deal with the issues that you're going to be confronting with respect to all of your business issues without focusing, for example, on climate change. Okay, and we're suddenly getting to be at that point. But the beauty of where I started out was that no one cared about the NBA, and we had, $78 million of revenue and 24 people in 1978. And gradually, through dealing with a variety of issues, not the least of which was Magic Johnson's announcement that he was HIV positive, did I have the opportunity to see what the impact could be of sports on a global scale. Magic's announcement was headline news in every newspaper, literally in the world, and got people having a conversation. I coined the phrase, if you want to have and engage the world in a single conversation, you could do it in the context of sports, because sports became the international language. Magic changed the debate on AIDS. The idea that we could now talk about it, that a young girl who was infected with AIDS on a TV show with magic wiping a tear away from her eye, became a complete and wonderful metaphor for how to talk about it and the pain that was being caused. Because the last thing that happened publicly before magic was a young child in Indiana, Brian White, who was banned from school because as a hemophiliac, he had become HIV positive. And so I was sort of caught up quietly with the notion that we really could make a difference. No one believed it, but then in 1993, we decided that we were going to visit South Africa. It was a crazy time. President Mandela was, soon to be President Mandela, was a couple of years out of prison, but he wasn't president yet. There were horrible killings in the hostels and the like, with internecine disputes in South Africa. We lost people who said that we're not going on that trip, so I said to my wife, Diane, well, someone has to go, so we're going, and we went with a party of about 20. And why did we go? Because apartheid was still the official policy of South Africa at that time, even though there had been changes. And the reason we went is that we were assured that we were guests, in effect, of the post-apartheid National Olympic Committee of South Africa, and that President Mandela would stop by for dinner. I said, okay, that's for me, that's the seal of approval. And so we were getting ready for dinner that night, and my head of security calls up and says, David, yes, Horace, the old man wants to see you. I said, Horace, what are you talking about? President Mandela. Or maybe he hadn't learned the Madiba phrase, but the old man was, okay, fine. And I called Charlie Grantham, was then the head of the Players Association. Holy Moses, Charlie, put your pants on. Because Nelson Mandela is coming to my room. And so I put my pants on, of course. And knock, knock, and there was Nelson Mandela. And I'm saying to myself, I'm in the sports league, and I'm about to meet Nelson Mandela. And he came in, he sat down, and we began talking for about a half an hour. And I said to him at that time, I said, why are you so peaceful? Why aren't you angrier? I don't understand it. And he said two things that I'll always take with me. The first is, this sort of conversation was, if you had come here 3 years ago, I would have been in prison. If you're here now, nothing gets done without consulting with me. And if you'll come to my inauguration next year, which, by the way, I did, you will see that I'll be president. So I'm not going to be upset right now. Of course, I was with him in later years when he was a little bit more aggressive, and it was nice to see. But then he said, but sports, and the reason I want to talk to you, is particularly important to us, because our children cannot read. We kept them out of school as part of the protest. And so if you brought books, it wouldn't work. But if you bring sports, it can bring people together. And if it works for Nelson Mandela, then it works for me, because he actually lived it out through the movie Invictus, and the fact that using the rugby championships, he was a symbol. And that was a well thought out symbol, because he had been thinking about that and shared that concept with me. And so we began as a league, quietly infused with the sense that we could make a difference. So I started making a list, and it's too long, but you name it. Nancy Reagan, just say no. I would, up to drugs. I was a cynic. I said, all right, we'll do it. It's a good PR. But actually, drug use was down with Mrs. Reagan's campaign. I went, when the president asks, despite my sort of leanings otherwise, I always go. And it got, hey, listen, I was at the state dinner for Jacques Chirac sitting with Mrs. Reagan, so it's not all bad, but it was, and the most circulated photo of the 8 years of the Reagan presidency was Wayman Tisdale and Charles Barkley lifting up Mrs. Reagan to put a basket in a Just Say No campaign in Indiana, okay? And it has an impact, and each one of those grew. So we've worked not only with HIV/AIDS, not only with, drugs, we worked with respect to hunger, Share Our Strength, Second Harvest, you name it. Everyone thinks that sports is the answer to their issues. We've worked with child abuse. We've worked with the Special Olympics. We worked with dropout prevention. And then people went further and said, that's not enough. You need to get involved with the curriculum. I said, no, that's the job of the schools. We'll work with getting the kids into the schools. It can't be that sports is the answer to every problem. But then we got roped into dealing with literacy. And we did it, but as much as we tried to do it and to be helpful, came the realization that there were other parts of society that were failing the people that we were being asked to help. And that goes true, and these were not public relations stunts. Working with nothing but nets to stop malaria in Africa doesn't get you a lot of points, it just gets you a lot of good feelings because you can make real, I was able to cite numbers that if you could just have a dipped net in a series of tents, you can save lives in an incredible way. The Martin Luther King Holiday Commission, the entire, and now we've moved, I keep saying we because I never say they. That's why I like to be described as Commissioner Emeritus. We've moved to Green Week. We've moved to sustainability concepts with our leagues, with our teams having LEED certified buildings. We've tried to make our events more sustainable. We've done that. And then we work with the Army on, and the Armed Forces is on, Hoops for Troops, which is an NBA sponsored, recently got some publicity up at West Point when the national team was going to be there. And I must tell you that it hasn't only been in this country. In other words, I was in the then, I guess it was in the Soviet Union. No, it was Russia by that time. That's right. When I was there twice on basketball-related matters. Once, in 1988, it was the Soviet Union, and I was in Kaunas, and the birthplace of Šarūnas Maršalonis and Arvydas Sabonis, and you haven't lived until the secretary of the Kaunas Communist Party says to you across the table, including the mayor, do you know that Sabonis is on the draft list of the Portland Trailblazers and I have no room to sign him under the salary cap? Isn't that un-American? So I turned to my wife and I said, there's something going on here that I'm just beginning to understand. And that's the way, and seriously, we were in the Soviet Georgia in Tbilisi and we saw the loudest cheer come for the Atlanta Hawks for Spud Webb. I'm saying, Spud Webb? And well, when he won the slam dunk contest 2 years earlier in Dallas, there were pirated tapes from Turkey that were running on Georgian television, and everybody knew about Spud Webb. And so, you learn that, technology is your friend. I mean, I won't go into the business underpinnings of the move to digital or the fact that somebody can have 1,000 NBA games on their device any place in the world for a mere $199, but that's a completely separate notionality. For me, the notionality was that sports has a special role to play, and it will always engage the world in a single conversation. And whether it's about, dare I say it, domestic violence, which is obliterating the television screens these days, but engaging people in a conversation about what it is and how it should be dealt with. And by the way, I would add, firing up passions that are so intense that people forget there is such a thing, because I may not be in active practice, but there is such a thing as due process. And so when someone gets accused of something, and I'm not talking about Ray Rice, I'm talking about others, that person should be summarily dispatched, to say it gently, is not exactly right, because in the NBA we always formulated an approach that said if there's a criminal or even a civil case, you wait until its outcome is determined before you go ahead and do what you're going to do. And that's just the same, that's the same thing. That's a teaching lesson. People have to step up. I used to say that if USA Today had a statistic that a third of Americans couldn't read, that was just a statistic. But if Dexter Manley of the Washington Redskins, a really old Redskin, couldn't read after going through 4 years of supposedly of college, that was a story. And that's what sports, that's the difference with sports. And that's what actually makes me a little more comfortable accepting the Botwinick Award, because I can talk about the things that businesses do and the things that you're going to have the opportunity to do when you're there. My own reaction to this is, and I'll say this in the, where's Dean Hubbard? I have to whisper. I have to say that, Milton Friedman was wrong. The business of business is not just business. The business of business is doing well for the shareholders, but doing well for the employees, the consumers, the community, and the greater community. And anyone that doesn't understand that, okay, given the failure of our institutions to do almost anything, I mean, I have lived it for 30 years, and we've been doing it from that time. And if there's one thing I have to impart to you, that's it, okay? It shouldn't take a major campaign to change curricula. It should be, read the newspapers, look what's going on out there, and it is quite extraordinary. The breakdown in everything from, why is it such a big deal? Hats off, whatever you think politically about your mayor. I live in Westchester. Kids for kindergarten programs or pre-kindergarten, of course. Operation Head Start, gutted, of course. We deal with it all. Poverty, homelessness, as President Mandela said, at a subsequent speech I heard him give, you don't care about when you're hungry, unfed, unclothed, and uneducated. You really care about the kind of system that you have. And I guess what I would say to you is that you're going to have the opportunity to interact with everything there in the corporate world. Doesn't matter what you do and how dry it may seem, you're going to be making those choices. And I'm here to tell you, there's only one choice to do, and that's the right thing. And you'll know exactly what it is just by staying up to date on what's happening in the world. So thank you so much. Okay, now I'm getting the award. All right, come on up. You can have it. Those guys don't matter. Oh, my God.
Thanks to Elaine, Ed, Vicky, James for their support over the years. I'm very happy to give you the Botwinick Prize.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Get back to class, please.